Hi, Alysa. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Starting off another busy week in Ketch land, privacy land. I'm sure it's the same for you.
Oh yeah, shot out of a cannon this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thrilled to catch up with you today on our latest Privacy Huddle edition. Have a few topics I'm hoping we can touch on. Running through them at the top here, we have a lot of interesting activity in DC these days. I'd love for you to break down some of the DOGE issues, and then I'd love to touch on this week's couple conferences that we'll be both participating in, Ramp Up as well as the California Lawyers Association Summit. So, can we rock through those three?
Sure. Okay, let's break it down. I've been focusing on the DOGE issues for several reasons. Take my citizen hat away and just think of it purely from my lawyer hat. There have been a lot of headlines on access to really vast amounts of consumer personal information by Elon Musk's team looking to, let's just say, redivert narrow resources by the government. But what it tees up is you have two things. You have one, potential litigation on privacy issues that we're going to have courts deciding on. And so that's going to be some interesting court-based decisions that I think will affect substantively how we think about privacy. I mean, those are dealing with federal laws, which are really old and apply to the federal government. But so many companies get subpoenas by different federal agencies asking for various records, which often include personal information. So I think it is relevant when I think about it from a what can companies consider of how this might impact them and things to think about. But the other thing, if you go back to the first Trump administration, the Democrat AGs were litigating with the Trump administration on a number of things. Now we have privacy issues that are likely to take these staffed up privacy teams in AG's offices. It's going to take some of their attention. And that means their attention and resources in some capacity might be focused on that issue as opposed to the volume of investigations into companies. I mean, there's just nobody has infinite resources. And so I am keeping an eye on that. I will tell you so far, lots of CIDs and subpoenas going out by different state offices, so it has not slowed down. I'm definitely seeing activity. So I wouldn't say take your eye off the ball, and yes, you should work on your compliance, but I do think it's another variable that's a relevant factor.
Yeah, that's interesting. Great point about the resources being split, but still expecting a ramp up in enforcement this year, right? So likely.
It's happening. I mean, they just have more people and it is a priority, and you have a lot more laws now able to be enforced. So just look at the numbers and that plays out.
Yeah.
I do think, as companies think about, there's certain hot issues, and we've talked about that in the past, right? Ad tech, data brokers, data collaborations, all the things that make headlines typically are headlines that regulators are seeing.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks for breaking that down. This week's going to be busy in privacy. I'm curious about how you're approaching and the conversations you're having leading up to the LiveRamp conference this week, Ramp Up, which will be at Moscone in San Francisco. Interesting conference because certainly from your privacy vantage point, it's where privacy really intersects with a lot of business critical revenue streams like advertising. What kind of conversations are you having in lead up to this one? And what are you expecting to talk about there?
So I always think it's fascinating with my privacy nerd hat on. Like, we can talk about compliance and how do we work through things, but businesses need to make money. Advertising is just such a crucial part to that. Advertising has faced so many changes from privacy and different business pressures. And so these conferences are where there are discussions about what's the thing around the corner, what are businesses trying now, what's an effective way to advertise. And so I always want to hear directly from the business teams on where the ball is moving, because from the legal standpoint, I want to overlay that with how do I help support that in a way that's going to be compliant and actually accounts for these legal requirements. And it's the Rubik's Cube. I think there are ways to do it. It requires being creative, but this way we're not reactive and responding to what the teams were doing 5 years ago. We're really thinking through what they're happening now. This has never happened before, but I'm starting to get calls from analysts who see that I'm attending that, who wish to pay me to give them observations on what I'm seeing at the conference. And I think that tells you something. Like, we're in this volatile period where definitely numbers go up or down depending on how companies decide to move forward with their advertising strategy. And there's investors who are really paying attention to that. And I think those are some dots we need to connect with the Privacy In-House Council as they're working with the business teams. So I think it goes to how you even communicate, right? And package the advice that you're providing.
Wow, that is fascinating. Analysts reaching out, a sign of the real shift, right, in the industry.
Exactly.
Wow. And then lastly, this week, we're going to follow up Ramp Up with a quick jaunt down to LA for the California Lawyers Association Annual Summit. Personally, I'm really excited about this one. Ketch's first time sponsoring, so I'll be there with our crew. And we got a peek at the registration list, and it's so many privacy councils, so many regulators. And I just love these small conferences. It's so intimate, and you get everybody kind of convening and chatting in such an informal way that you don't get at some of the bigger ones. What are you excited about for the summit?
Well, I think it's the best kept secret. And I'm sure, I don't know, 5 years from now, it'll be a whole huge, big event. But right now, it's so substantive, but in a really accessible, practical way. Like, I think I've gone each of the past years and have always come away feeling like I got something new out of that. And I go to a lot of these different things. Like, there's just really good speakers, and it's all the conversations you're having when in the hallways and at the tables. So A, I highly recommend. But B, I'm looking forward to, they have a ton of government enforcers from, obviously from California. We've got the CPPA and the California Attorney General's office, but you have Colorado and Texas. You have just so many other states. And they've got a few panels so that the enforcers are not only speaking on one panel, you've got them really peppered throughout the conference. And I just always think that that's really interesting. The topics are really timely, right? We're still working through de-identification. We're still working through clean rooms and ad tech and kids data and health data. So we've just got really focused panels that get into some of the meaty issues. I'm looking forward to both learning, talking, seeing what are people asking about. It'll be good.
Yes, can't wait. Well, folks, if you can't make it to these events, Alysa and I know are happy to be your ambassadors. Comment below if there's anything you're curious about, or we can do some debriefs next week too to share what we've come away with. But Alysa, thanks as always for sharing with us. Appreciate it.
Good to talk.